VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. 100 days till the NFL draft, 8 weeks until free agency. This is the Vikings 2024 offseason, and over the weekend, I'd say the Vikings plight, predicament, future became stormier because before our very eyes in living color, three events unfolded, and they all directly involved the Vikings' primary foes. So that's our topic today. I'm going to go through them one by one and explain how a sense of urgency was moved up, is expedited on the calendar for your Vikings. Not necessarily like a panic thing, but it's like, all right, well, this has arrived a lot sooner than we thought. So we will jump right into it, going down the line. The first is let's get this out of the way. There's a very good chance that one or two NFC North teams get to the NFC Championship. And it seems like the San Francisco 49ers are now the last line of defense if you don't want the Packers or the Lions to get to a Super Bowl. That sounds like, a jealous Vikings fan talking, but a lot of yous out there would rather not see the Packers or Lions in the Super Bowl. And now you have to rely on a trusted confidant in the 49ers to dispatch them from the postseason. That's how wonderful the weekend went for the Packers and Lions. On the Packers, youngest playoff team in 40 years, something like that. Whatever it is, the stat that was flung around over and over. The Packers were really at their emotional low point in week 8 when the Vikings went up 24-3. Kirk Cousins was injured 45 minutes later. That team looked like such garbage that afternoon. They looked just like the Chicago Bears. And then they were anemic on offense. They were at home, were getting their asses beat. And then that was, who could have thunk it at the time, that was when they just decided we are going to get up off the mat and be good. So they've navigated their way to the postseason. They had a couple turds along the way against the Giants and then the Buccaneers, who we'll talk about momentarily. But when you go to Dallas, who was a fortress of home field advantage, you spank them. They made the box score look respectable so that when you look back on it in 10 years, 48-32, well, that was good game. No, it wasn't. It was 48-16 at one point. The Packers absolutely smashed the Cowboys. Jordan Love had a game of the ages, like one of the best quarterback games you can see from anybody at any time, whether it's Rodgers in his prime or Love in his first start or Montana in multiple Super Bowls. The Packers are here, and unless there's a weird regression like the Eagles showed before our very eyes, with the youth the Packers have and Jordan Love's trajectory, it looks like they're here to stay. This is what they do. So now they have to be accounted for as formidable. I don't know if Love will be a Hall of Famer, but they aren't just some 9-8 team that squeaked into the postseason. Who knows if they'll be good next year? Now the Vikings management and you as the fan have to assume that these guys are already transitioned into the post-Rodgers era, and they're here to stay. And they and the Lions now will be on deck per sports books to take the NFC North next year. So with the Packers here, then you have the Lions. They've already begun their rebuild, and they're right there at the top of the NFC North. They're going to the divisional round. They're probably going to beat the Buccaneers at home. So the Lions, just as was predicted by the masses and Dan Campbell, all the rah-rah stuff about him, they achieved what everybody talked about the last offseason. This guy was wrong. I didn't think that they would be. I thought they'd be about 9-8, 10-7. I didn't trust Jared Goff. They are an example of a team that doesn't need to have an absolute superstar quarterback. They are foundationally sound. The trenches are good. They've got the playmakers. And now the Lions, too, are right there with the Packers in terms of long-term stability. And that's assuming they keep Goff. They could surprise everybody and start Hendon Hooker or draft a guy, trade up and draft somebody sweet, although that's probably unlikely. But the takeaway is before you even get to the Bears, the Packers and Lions look like a team who is poised to win at least 9 or 10 games for the next several years, which leaves the Vikings vying for first, second, or third place. The Vikings have to move up their timetable. They had this one precious year last year where the Packers were meandering through life. Rodgers was hurt and not very good. The Lions started, 1-7, finished the season hot. The Bears were ridiculous. Last year was the season. If the Vikings ever wanted to pounce, strangle the division, and go win a Super Bowl, it was 2022. Now, 2023 has shown that the NFC North turned around in 1 year. Everybody else is back. So the Packers are there. We'll see how they do against the 49ers, probably lose. The Lions are probably going to be in the NFC Championship. And then after the day of which those two teams advanced the divisional round, the day after, Caleb Williams declared for the 2024 NFL Draft, which gives the Bears a green light, a passage to go draft Caleb Williams. So if they don't like Justin Fields or they think Caleb Williams is a better option, boom, the Bears are right there to get, a generational prospect in Caleb Williams. And that is 3 teams that will accompany your Vikings 6 games per season that they all play each other. The foundation and the landscape of the NFC North changed, or at least was verified within 24 hours over the weekend. So what does this do to the Vikings? Well, there's a lot of panic, but we forget that the Vikings lost their quarterback, didn't have their wide receiver for 7 weeks, still finished 7-10 with a hodgepodge assortment of backup quarterbacks. So it's not like the Vikings are starting at 0 here, and you're like, oh boy, what are we going to do? We're going to have to start rebuilding. No, the rebuild has been in play for 2 years, and now entering year 3 with what was a new regime 2 years ago. They have to examine their neighbors, and that's the Packers, Bears, and Lions, and realize the competitive rebuild has to be competitive this offseason or the next. Otherwise, you're going to get left in the dust. I think if they did not have a quarterback on their radar for the 11th overall pick or trading up the board to get their pick of the litter, their favorite guy, that all of that, maybe they will. All of that, to me, died this weekend. To keep pace, to throw haymakers with the Packers, Lions, maybe Bears if Caleb Williams is good. The Vikings can't keep thinking, all right, well, this year we're going with Kirk Cousins, and we think that it's going to be different. Because as much as I enjoy Kirk Cousins' skill set, you risk doing the same thing over and over and over and thinking, well, they're not going to go 9-8, 10-7 this year. They're going to go 13-4 and actually win a playoff game. And at age 36 for Cousins in August, and then coming back at the torn Achilles, I don't think you have the luxury anymore to think, all right, let's give him another hurrah in this system, and then have that be the standalone plan. Therefore, if the Vikings were on the fence whatsoever, they probably weren't. But if you were, as a fan, like, oh, maybe we should stand pat and get the best defensive tackle, the Newton guy from Illinois, I don't think you have that luxury anymore, unless they fall in love with a quarterback from round 2 or 3. And I'm not talking as we'll wait and we'll go get Jaren Hall, or hey, we'll get Michael Pratt in round 3 or 4 and then call it good. That might work, but I know that the plan, if you want to keep up with the way that the NFC North is trending, if you want to bring Cousins back, so be it. But you have got to have the contingency plan waiting. Last year, they didn't draft anybody besides Jaren Hall. In 2022, thank God they didn't draft any quarterbacks because that class sucked. Kenny Pickett was the headliner. The only one that turned out to be worth the damn was Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. So kudos to Kwesi for not force drafting somebody in 2022. But they opted not to get a quarterback with first or second round capital last year. And with all of the emergent NFC North teams, now is the time. You don't have any, there's no more grace period. Whether it's J.J. McCarthy and you let him watch behind Kirk for a season, whether you trade up and get Drake May, as an arms race, the Vikings have to at least decide on that player now. And if Kirk is involved in the 2024-2025 plan, understandable. But he is irrelevant to how the Vikings proceed this offseason when they're regarding who they're going to get as the quarterback of the future. If they're going to do both, so be it. But at the very least, you have to spend high-round draft capital on a quarterback, or you're going to have these other teams pass you by. Now, there's a lot of yous that say, well, Kirk was playing his best football of his life right before he torn his Achilles. And I don't really disagree, but there's a lot of you that says, well, why don't we just run it back with Kirk, and then we'll build this defense out with the 11th overall pick. And I have to fundamentally disagree. I don't think that you have that time. I don't think if you don't draft the quarterback now, then you are kicking the can down the road and hoping that the 2025 draft class will have your quarterback of the future. We have been told for now a year that this draft class is the one that's deep, just like we were told in 2022 that class with Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis sucked. That was correct. We were told now this quarterback class is deep. Wouldn't you know it, the Vikings have their highest draft pick since 2016. With Kirk Cousins as quarterback, you're probably never going to get higher than this draft pick. You got lucky, if for draft pick sake, that Cousins got injured because the team finished 7-10. It is very unlikely that with Cousins at the helm in 2024, 2025, that you will ever pick again as high as 11. You couple that, precious spot, number 11, with the fact that you have a very deep quarterback draft class. Now is the time to use the first pick. It has to be the second, so be it, on a quarterback. You've got plenty of money in free agency. You can, ask Harrison Smith to take a pay cut. You can restructure contracts, but you can build out free agency or build out the defense through free agency and build on what you already have. The Vikings defense improved from 24th DVOA 2022 to 11th in 2023. The only problem is because it collapsed down the stretch of this season, you think the defense sucks. Well, it certainly sucked in those 4 games, but as a grander product, the defense markedly improved. So this guy is of the opinion, yeah, for certain you can improve on defense, whether you want to get a sexy defensive tackle. Certainly have to get another edge rusher if Danielle Hunter's coming back. If you want to get better at corner, great. But in my opinion, those needs should be addressed in free agency because you have this nice little sack of cash. And I don't think you have time to just draft them and figure out the quarterback stuff later. Now, right now, in year number 3 of this competitive rebuild with a young general manager and head coach, the rubber is hitting the road. You have to... do the Vikings really want to be the first team that had a rebuild but they didn't get a new quarterback? I mean, even the most ardent of anti-tank people think you have to draft a quarterback to succeed Kirk Cousins. And when you had this timetable of NFC North competition that was accelerated in 24 hours over the weekend, plus you have a quarterback who's going to be 36 and coming back from an injury, the rubber has absolutely hit the road that now is the time, year 3 of a competitive rebuild, you have to identify who the quarterback will be to lead life after Kirk Cousins, whether he comes back or not, simply to keep pace. And, it all comes down, everything about Vikings football, I will argue this until it's no longer relevant. The only thing that really matters is whether or not Kwesi Adolpho-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell hit on the quarterback draft pick. So hopefully, for their sake and your sake, they do that, but they have to step up to the plate, take the swing in this draft. All right, we'll be back tomorrow to talk with Josh Fry, more about off-season stuff. And then Friday, Dakota Kep will join us. And we shall see you then. Skol, baby.